I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com.
So, I mean, you've covered lots of cases involving the Criminal Assets Bureau, obviously in this year and last year. But what we see is a trend where, as well as targeting the people that are suspected of involvement in organised crime, increasingly the girlfriends or the partners or the wives of these criminals are also being targeted. And that's something that maybe didn't happen as much in the past. But a good example of that is the partners of two guys who have been linked to the family gang, and probably now the biggest single supplier of cocaine in Ireland. Tell us about this case and who it's targeting.
Yeah, so, well, I suppose the reason why the Criminal Assets Bureau have been targeting family members of the people who are the actual criminals is because sometimes the property is in their name. And that's what's happening in this case. I mean, it was the main case, I suppose, target of it was Jamie Geoghegan, and his partner in crime was Brad White, and they're both married to two sisters. Yeah. And when the Bureau first initially, it was a local profiler in the Clondalkin area that kind of nominated these two men, and then, well, it was Geoghegan first, and then saw the kind of the links between him and White. So you have Jamie is married to Charlene Craig, and Brad White his partner is Charmaine. So sorry, it's Charlene is married to Jamie Geoghegan, and Charmaine is married to Brad White. Yeah, so you have two sisters, and
so both two sisters married to two of the chief sort of gang members.
Yeah. So essentially, they were. You know, I suppose the women were enjoying to some extent the proceeds of crime. Like Charlene, I suppose was specifically she was the registered owner of a VW Golf that was confiscated by CAB from Jamie Geoghegan. I mean, it was very much the judge in the case kind of, you know, heard from the CAB council that, you know, while other people are named, that all the property, and certainly in her case, was in the control of Jamie Geoghegan.
And I mean, again, like, another sort of recent feature of the CAB cases where they're targeting these guys, so the mid-level, I suppose, like they're high up members of the family gang, but they're not, you know, importing drugs or anything. They're really, you know, street captains. But again, the Criminal Assets Bureau have this policy now of targeting the clothes, the jewellery, all of the stuff that I suppose is so important to these guys. And, you know, there's a phenomenal list of stuff there that's taken in this case.
I mean, yeah, so as part of the raid on Brad White's house, where he lived with Charmaine, this in Sylvan Avenue in Kingswood and Tala. So there was a search in July 2021, and there was quite an array. So there was, you know, a man and woman's Rolex watch, which were valued at 7,800 and 3,000. There was things like a pair of Valentino Garavani men's trainers, a pair of Alexander McQueen men's trainers, Louboutin trainers, Louboutin ladies and men's sandals, ladies Gucci espadrilles, and
what's
then
espadrille?
I don't know, because I asked Denise Smith how to pronounce the next one, which is the Balenciaga ladies trainers.
Balenciaga, isn't it?
Balenciaga. Yeah. Well, that's the way I phonetically wrote it down.
Because I know that, because I do know a family member, let's say, bought a pair of fake Balenciaga, and they still cost 200 quid. The fake ones.
The fake ones did, so they're well worth it.
Yeah.
And of course there was the almost ever-present Canada Goose men's jacket, and Moncler jackets, and a Louis Vuitton bag. So, I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen a list of similar, I suppose, items. It's about 11.5 grand's worth. The VW Golf then that was also taken as well from Charmaine was worth about 24,000. But I suppose the point in it, like Brad White certainly, you know, like we'd already kind of spoken before about Jamie Geoghegan, and was described as the leading like drug dealer in West Dublin in that kind of Clondalkin area. And White was identified as a high-ranking member of an organised crime gang who controlled the supply of drugs, using violence and intimidation to ensure that drugs debts were repaid. And again, direct links to leading member of the family mob, who we know have been described as basically they've taken over from the Kinahans in terms of their operations within Ireland. They're by far seen as the biggest organised crime gang. Yeah,
so you see these guys like Geoghegan and White, like, the family are, I suppose, an international crime gang. But they still have this really strong base in West Dublin, and they're also, you can see in some of the seizures, many of them which we can't get into because there's cases before the courts, how they've become, they've basically had agents in every sort of corner of the country. But West Dublin is still their base, and they have these, I suppose, if in mafia terms, these are the captains, people like Geoghegan and Brad White, who are probably not getting involved in the international aspect of the business, but they're certainly controlling, controlling that side of the business.
And it was mentioned about Geoghegan before, about, using teenagers, some as young as 15, that were selling the drugs. And we know that this particular gang have been involved in serious feuding. And it's even like directly, you have one of the Craigs, their sisters, one of their brothers, Ryan Craig, just recently got 5 years. He drove over Dylan Gilligan, a nephew of John Gilligan's. And that was, I think, on the 14th of November, he got his 5-year sentence for that. And then there was another brother, Jack Craig. He got a suspended sentence for a relatively minor role in a 2020 incident in which members of the gang, including Jamie Geoghegan, followed a teenager, chased him into a school. And they had various weapons at the time, and the same kid was 6 months later suffered a serious head injury. So I mean, these guys have been involved in a number of unreported. When I say unreported, they weren't reported to guards, but people in the area were certainly aware of them, like gun attacks and a lot of tit for tat attacks in that West Dublin area, which is really. I suppose it's everyone's worst fear if you're in an area and you have these gangs going at each other. I mean, one of the things that they were chasing, Cab in this case, was a modular home at the back of the house where Geoghegan lived. I think it was worth in excess of 130,000, and I think there was even more fittings added to that. But that was since burned down because he's actually serving a lengthy enough sentence, a 6.5-year sentence for his partner kidnap of a man who was alleged to have stolen heroin from the family. And this guy was rescued by the guards. He was in a very bad way. Had looked like, I think there was a hood over his head, and he was in his boxer shorts and had suffered a lot of lacerations and cuts. And Geoghegan got a lengthy sentence for that. That's where he is at the minute.
Yeah, very violent crime, and I suppose, given the fact he's a young man, the length of sentence sort of reflects that there's a lot of violence used. Now, Charmaine and Charlene, they're named in these cab cases. Now, they're obviously not suspected of direct involvement in any of the drug dealing business, but they're suspected of when they're named in cab cases, it's a civil action to say that they're in possession of these assets.
And it's exactly that. I mean, and like their mother Sabrina was mentioned as a respondent as well, because she was connected to one of the vehicles that cab successfully argued were the proceeds of crime. So this is why. Yeah. They're named. It's not suggesting that they're leading members of the gang themselves, but there are assets that the cab are saying are the proceeds of crime that happens to be registered in your name, and we know that the money for that came from Jamie Geoghegan, whether he's your son-in-law or your partner. Yeah, the money came from drug dealing, because again, they come up with the full social welfare files of people. So, I mean, they can see exactly how much people have earned in any given year, how much they've claimed if they're on social welfare. And you can't really have a black hole in your finances if you're driving a 24 grand VW and the cash just isn't there. Yeah. It's quite obvious then that it's come from illicit sources.
And I think there was some explanation given for some of the designer gear that it came from Turkey, but this obviously wasn't accepted by the court.
Yeah, more than that, they had a valuer actually check it out, and they came up with the valuations on the goods. I mean, they do that all the time. Yeah. I mean, it'd be an obvious one to kind of use that it's fake. Yeah. I think it was used in another case as well.
It's been used in a few, yeah. So Charmaine, of course, it's not her, I don't know if she was in court for those cab hearings, but she has appeared in court before for much, a minor incident, but there was certainly some violence used, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, of course, it was actually referred to in the affidavits, but there is a court report about it as well. It was back in 2009. She was convicted of assaulting and causing harm to another woman. She was actually given probation, and she was to engage in victim awareness and anger management, but she had attacked a woman in a supermarket, left her with some head injuries, and doctors told the victim that it would have been worse if she suffered another blow to her head. This is all heard in court at the time. And the victim had mentioned that Craig had continued to torment the victim, calling her various names, and at one stage suggesting that she was going to leave her in a bloodbath. And then this was after that, that was initially heard, I think, at one of the hearings, and afterwards then it was told that she had to to go on a an anger management program as a result of that.
Yes, and we don't know if that worked.
And of course, yeah, she wasn't in court for the cab. I mean, the only person who was there was actually Geoghegan, who was brought in handcuffs. You know, he was produced from court, and I think it was very much because they weren't represented. So they had to they go through not so much the motions, but they have to ensure that this person is aware that they've been served legally. And while other people may have been contacted and said that they weren't going to do it because he's in custody, they'll produce him in court. And we've seen that in one or two other cases, and we're expecting another one or two in the near future where somebody's going to be produced from court, for instance, to say, like, you know, my solicitor's gone off record and I don't want him to work for me anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose you can see with the family, it does, you know, Geoghegan's criminal past does give an insight into how they operate. While they have been linked to murders, they have tried to stay probably a step away from that sort of wide-scale murders that were being committed by other gangs that really brought on the police attention. There's no doubt they have been linked to murders, but maybe they've tried to, you know, maybe get people to do them, I suppose, and keep a slight bit away from it. But they've been heavily involved in using very extreme violence to collect debts, because obviously they're a huge drugs gang and they need to have that fear. And somebody like Geoghegan, who I think wasn't he described as a talented footballer at one stage, but I mean, he certainly
yeah, he would have been. I think he was actually part-time professional footballer with one of the League of Ireland clubs, and had represented underage, and it was mentioned in one of his court cases that he also played in the Irish homeless team at one point. So he qualified for that either through football skill or not having an address at the time. Yeah,
but he's suspected of, certainly the case he was convicted of, I mean, it was particularly savage sort of use of violence.
No, it was. I mean, and his role in it, and was caught on a Ring doorbell. Like, they got out of a Land Cruiser and knocked on this guy's door, who didn't think he was necessarily in any trouble, and was manhandled into the Jeep. And then I think people were able to alert the guards fairly quick. This Jeep was spotted in another part of town. I mean, it happened out in I think it was Ongar, and then they were back into closer into Clondalkin then. And Gardaí spotted Geoghegan and another man sort of, I suppose, near this property. And when they went in, then the guys did a runner and they found this guy on the floor of the caravan, like badly injured. Like, you know, he'd borne the signs of being tortured. Now, there was no evidence that Geoghegan had taken directly in this. But like, he did have a major role in the abduction and torture of this guy. So that's what he was sentenced for.
And of course, you see with the family gang, like a case like this, it comes to light because a witness has seen something and reported to the guards. But there is a belief, I think, that there's many more of these cases where somebody may be involved in the drugs business and, you know, they don't go to police. And we certainly hear a lot of reports about that kind of use of violence to collect those debts.
Yeah, well, this particular case entirely rested on the Garda evidence. So, I mean, that absolutely bears that out. Yeah. I mean, you know, and I suppose they were caught red-handed. Yeah. So, I mean, if a gentleman like this had turned up at some point in James Connolly Memorial Hospital, like, he wouldn't be telling anyone how he got his injuries. And we actually saw that with Geoghegan himself at one stage. Yeah. He suffered a very light shotgun pellet wound back in 2019. So he would have been, early 20s at that stage. And with another kind of person who was kind of connected to the gang, and of course refused to say how he got hurt. So I mean, he knows all about it himself. Yeah,
so there's these reported crimes, but there's many more that don't go reported ultimately, particularly if people have ties to criminality themselves. It's certainly a no-no. Anyway, no doubt we'll be coming back to Geoghegan because I think even behind bars he's been up to no good. So it's something we're going to continue to look at.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Eamon.
Always a pleasure, Niall.